Hi guys, welcome to the audio video version of the Still Waters article in case you're more of a audio learner or a video learner and not so much a reader. I wanted to make this video to accompany the article. So you have all different ways of accessing it. And currently I'm in my home with my dog chilling behind me. And yeah, it's not always going to be perfect polished videos. Sometimes I'm just going to pop up on here, cozy. And I hope you are too. So with that being said, let's get started. Just like a beautiful river can carry toxins that harm its surroundings, the human brain can hold on to pain in a way that damages health and well being. Traumatic stress flows freely through the veterinary profession, but most veterinarians aren't practicing with an active awareness of this fact. And I just always ask, how can we solve a problem without understanding it? Simple answer is we can't, unless it's an anomaly or sheer luck, which can happen. But the majority of the time, we need to understand the problem we're trying to solve in order to solve it. As a profession, we focus primarily on symptoms of compassion fatigue, such as burnout or even end stage traumatic stress, can be suicide or just leaving self harm that slowly happens over time. So many different things that can be attributed to actually end stage traumatic stress or unsolved traumatic stress. Traumatic stress precedes all of these conditions we name so commonly in veterinary medicine. Educating ourselves on the effects of trauma will improve our health, the health of our practices, and the strength of our teams. Even if you decide not to stay in practice, it's still very important for you to understand how traumatic stress has impacted you or may continue to impact you in other areas of your life. Because what you don't know can hurt you. It's fascinating to me as a medical professional who's undertaken years of schooling that there's still a vast amount I don't know about healing and medicine. I mean, in vet school, they did say we're only teaching you about like 10% of what you even need to know for going out into practice. I don't know if they were joking or if that was real, but on some level, it must have been accurate. So it shouldn't really shock me that much. But I was faced with this reality when I stumbled into the field of psychological trauma. It was the first time I became starkly aware that what I didn't know could hurt me and had likely been hurting me for years. Within the first few years of me graduating vet school, I began to question my career choice. I found myself struggling to understand why I felt so terrible when I left work, especially after dealing with emotionally intense clients and situations involving animals. It wasn't just when I left work, it started to become like even when I was going to work in the morning or even when I was at work. So I came across the book, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Reading through it, I realized I was experiencing traumatic stress and, in turn, not recovering effectively from it. Now, in his book, he doesn't specifically talk about veterinary medicine. Everything in that I've extrapolated from his book, I've made it or at least tried to make it make sense for us in veterinary medicine. However, I will be sharing a lot of what he shares in his book. For instance, the definition of psychological trauma. Psychological trauma, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, also known as the DSM, occurs when an individual experiences an event involving death or serious injury and feels intense fear, helplessness, or horror as a result. Once I realized this was happening in my work as a veterinarian, I sought help through therapy. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a single trauma-informed therapist where I lived at the time in Maui, Hawaii. Eventually, I realized I didn't have time to wait around for help. I needed to help myself. I contacted the International Association of Trauma Professionals and asked if I could pursue training with them as a veterinarian. So, normally their trainings are for licensed social workers, licensed counselors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. They, however, to my delight and excitement, allowed me to enroll in their online training, which led to my certification as a clinical trauma professional. This basically gave me the ability to fully understand how traumatic stress manifests, in addition to being able to talk more about it traumatic stress in the educational realm. Around this time, I was also diagnosed with an illness that I would later discover was a tumor. While benign, it was causing health complications and affecting my quality of life. It took me almost 3 years of restorative therapy and multiple surgeries to finally resolve my health issues. I believe it was my discoveries related to traumatic stress that ultimately led to my healing and also helped me stay in a career that I love. This is why I am passionately trying to spread the word about this epidemic that is quietly destroying us. As an analogy, we can compare psychological trauma to a poisoned river. In this case, I like to use the example of the Flint, Michigan water crises. On April 25th, 2014, officials in Flint switched the city's water supply to the Flint River in an effort to cut costs. This change introduced water contaminated with lead and other toxins into homes and businesses. The city of Flint was ill-equipped to handle its financial crisis, so officials made a decision that appeared to be sound initially. But they didn't have enough support or resources to make their decision in a safe way. And eventually, this led to an even greater crisis, one that threatened the health of the entire city. In this scenario, you can think of your brain as the city officials, the ones in charge, and your body as the city. The brain likes to be efficient and economical. It commands decisions that affect the rest of the body after a traumatic experience. If the trauma is not successfully resolved, the brain employs a diversion tactic. This helps the brain save on costs associated with dealing with the pain of the trauma. However, this can lead to more serious consequences downstream. Our brains are often not equipped to process trauma effectively. Some people have better resources, such as a personal support system, more inner resilience that they were naturally born with or developed in childhood. And some have what is known as inherent resiliency, systems in place to quickly mitigate adverse situations. Likewise, some cities have better financial health and community support, while others do not. Luckily for your brain and the city of Flint, help can come from elsewhere, and you can heal even after trauma. However, if you continue to be unaware that the well is poisoned or you ignore signals of distress, you could be harmed irrevocably. It's interesting how when the water change initially occurred in Flint, some residents did try to alert the officials, but they were silenced. This cover up led to even more sickness in Flint, even after the truth came out. If the facts had been revealed sooner, fewer people would have to suffer, and the damage may have not been as catastrophic as it was. Similarly, the brain likes to protect itself. It likes to feel like it can set up a defense if it's under attack. So it hides facts, it keeps secrets, hoping things will move along undisturbed. Often with trauma, the body feels or senses something is wrong and tries to alert the brain. But the brain shuts off or ignores these alerts because it's too busy worrying about other things coming its way, and it has a difficult time distinguishing what to prioritize. In the end, the poison continues to flow downstream, causing residual effects for years to come. This is how secrets can poison the well. And you may not even realize you're keeping secrets from yourself. Sometimes it could be a coping mechanism that you developed from childhood in order to deal with the difficult situations you needed to deal with in order to survive. A person who's passing the Flint River and doesn't know its history might see it as a beautiful and refreshing body of water. They may want to take a dip in the river or fish from it, but in the depths is poison. It can also poison things around it, soil, foliage, fauna, and so on. Often you can't tell by just looking at something if dangers are hidden beneath the surface. Not everything looks like a bubbling mud pit or quicksand from the Princess Bride with all the crazy, weird, giant rats running around. Sometimes it can appear completely innocuous. Some things are hidden so well that even the person who did the original hiding has forgotten where and what it is. Just as with lead poisoning, the effects of unresolved traumatic stress build up over months or years before outward manifestations of toxicity appear. Symptoms can include developmental delays, learning difficulties, irritability, loss of appetite, weight loss, weight gain, fatigue, abdominal pain, high blood pressure, joint and muscle pain, headaches, and mood disorders. These are symptoms of lead poisoning, but they can also be symptoms of unresolved traumatic stress. What is the cure for lead poisoning? Treatment involves avoiding further exposure to lead. Chelation therapy, if blood levels are confirmed around 45 micrograms per deciliter, that's when you would do chelation therapy or chelation therapy. And dietary changes, such as making your iron and calcium levels adequate, as this prevents lead from being able to bind and be absorbed or to be stored. There you have it. 1, reduce exposure. 2, therapy. 3, protectants. What is the cure for psychological trauma? The exact same steps. 1, reduce exposure. 2, therapy, mitigate effects of exposure. And 3, protectants, minimize damage from exposure. Unfortunately, in the veterinary field, we are repeatedly exposed to traumatic situations and are at risk for post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, and secondary traumatic stress disorder, also known as STSD, or compassion fatigue. Which compassion fatigue is actually a misnomer, guys, but I will get into that another time. Therefore, it can be a struggle to reduce our exposure to sources of traumatic stress, especially if we don't even realize we're suffering. Just like the people of Flint, we can't resolve our crisis until we know our level of exposure, or the fact that we were even exposed and what is going on in the first place. The most healing treatments for trauma involve knowledge and support. Understanding causation and knowing what to do empowers us to get back in the driver's seat after our brains have been on autopilot. Having people around us who can support us, whether it's in our workplace culture or with the help of a professional therapist or our community, will help us find our blind spots. I hope you will continue to explore this topic through a deep dive as we continue going through this lecture course series. For now, I will leave you with the quote from one of the fathers of research in the area of psychological trauma, Dr. Peter Levine. And he says, "If you are experiencing strange symptoms that no one seems to be able to explain, they could be arising from a traumatic reaction to a past event that you may or may not even remember. You are not alone. You are not crazy. There is a rational explanation for what is happening to you. You have not been irreversibly damaged, and it is possible to diminish or even eliminate your symptoms." And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this audio-video version of the article, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, friends.